Hi everyone, and welcome to RumRunner Dance. I'm Dan Genovese. Today we're going to be making a classic cocktail, the Old Fashioned.
Oh, blow the man down, bullies, blow the man down.
To me way, blow the man down.
Blow the man down, bullies, blow him away.
Give me some time to blow the man down. We went over the bar on the 13th of May. Way, blow the man down, but down.
The Old Fashioned cocktail is a classic that pretty much everyone is familiar with these days. Everyone has had it. It's pretty much on every decent bar menu in the country. But there's a lot of debate over what is an old fashioned. What's the right old fashioned? Does it have fruit in it? Is it a sugar cube? Does it have bitters? Does it have absinthe? Is it served on the rocks? Is it served neat? How is it made? Good questions. And actually, searching for the answer actually ends up with more questions than answers. So when you start to look into the history of the old fashioned, you kind of have to go back a little bit further. So let's go back to pre-Prohibition. Think back to right around the era of the Civil War. When people started drinking cocktails back then, cocktails were pretty much known by two different types. There was plain and then there was fancy. And the difference between the two, well, according to the research that David Wondrich did, we noticed that it primarily has to do with a glass or maybe a small bit of the finish. Might be served in a fancier cup than something else. Might have a little bit of orange or lemon peel draped onto the top of it. But the cocktail itself, not much different. So what went into those cocktails? Well, basically, there was some type of gum syrup. Normally you had some kind of bitters. At that time, it was probably more common to have Booker's aromatic bitters put into there than Angostura. And then you had your base spirit, and maybe a little bit of curacao was in there too, just a dash. Now your base spirit, you had options. So it wasn't just whiskey. You could have gin, you could have brandy, or you could have whiskey. Wait a minute, I thought an old fashioned was only whiskey. Yeah, we're getting there. So the plain and fancy cocktail were pretty common around those days. And as we know, cocktails evolve over time. So from the evolution of the plain and then even the fancy, albeit not that different cocktail, there came the improved cocktail. Now this was different. At that time, especially with Jerry Thomas and what he did, they documented that Booker's aromatic bitters or Angostura was called for. They kept the gum syrup, and also they kind of talked a little bit about curacao. That was in there. But they also added in maraschino cherry liqueur. That was a little bit new. And in addition to that, you had your option of whiskey, brandy, or gin. So that tells you these improved cocktails. Well, as you can imagine, this is around the mid-19th century to the latter half of the 19th century. So people started to say, they got real staunchy and they were holding on to something that was familiar, maybe more traditional. Maybe you could even call it old-fashioned. They were clinging on to something that they preferred. So what they asked for was a cocktail that was more akin to those old-fashioned type of cocktails that came about before they started improving and messing around with everything. Okay, so technically the old-fashioned in and of itself, right around then, was really a bit of not an evolution or not even a starting point. It was kind of a variation now on what they were serving now and kind of backing it up a little bit. So what did they do? Well, they took lump sugar, which they still had. They cut it off with snips. They put it inside of a glass. They would put a little bit of water in there, put some aromatic bitters, Angostura or Booker's, and then what they would do is muddle that together with probably most likely a toddy stick. Then they would crush it down inside of the glass, add a lump of ice, add in your spirit, whatever it is, and then stir it with a small spoon, and they'd serve it to you with that spoon. So you could keep stirring it. You know, the idea was is that you still had some grittiness of that sugar in there. It wasn't completely dissolved. Okay. Well, some people still kind of serve it like that today, similarly, maybe minus the spoon, because I think some people might get a little bit confused with that. You might get a stir stick, though. But not everyone then thinks that that's really an old-fashioned, because remember, still, you had your choice of gin, whiskey, or brandy. So where did the whiskey come from? Well, whiskey kind of came from the palate of America. We kind of switched our taste, and whiskey was very prevalent after Prohibition, and we started to make it again. And once it started to become available, America kind of loved whiskey. So as the whiskey cocktail kind of evolved, the old-fashioned evolved from kind of one of these three spirits that were in there to an improved, from a plain to a fancy to an improved to now a variation on those. Then it started to evolve itself. This often happens with drinks, and especially with mixology. They take a track. Something kicks off from another cocktail and then goes off on its own. The old-fashioned was pretty much that. That's where you have a lot of different variations on those cocktails. People tried to change them and improve upon them a little bit. That's where you start to get fruit getting in it, and Muddled, which, by the way, not my favorite. But, you know, people added different things into it. Some people use wheated bourbon, like a Maker's Mark. Some people use straight rye. Some people use different things. So everyone kind of does it a little bit differently. And they did it a little bit differently over time because the cocktail changed with people's tastes, and also kind of the taste of cocktails during those different eras. Well, that's kind of true of a lot of different cocktails. But now we kind of hit today. So what's the recipe? What's the recipe for an old-fashioned? Well, there really isn't one. You know, there's a lot of different recipes for it, but there isn't just one recipe that you could do. There's ones that were early that you could follow, like the ones that were in the late 1880s. That came from a bartender, basically a traveling guy that was here in Chicago, Illinois, that you could get it, and that was one of the first documented real old-fashions with whiskeys that was published. So you could follow that. You can follow another popular one, but at the end of the day, don't get hung up so much on what's in the cocktail, right? What should be in this cocktail is what you like. The big thing I would say, though, let's follow a simple template. And I think the template even goes back to what Jerry Thomas outlined. What you really want to keep in this cocktail, some type of sugar, right? You definitely want to keep in a good quality base spirit, not a bad one. You want a decent one, whatever one you can get, whether that's gin, brandy, or whiskey. Just get a good whiskey. And then you want to get good bitters, something good that you really like, an Angostura, scrappy aromatic bitters, or something even, Miss Better's bitters, Few Brothers, something of a good quality, tasty bitters. And on top of that, some type of sugar, right? And then, sweeten it up to your taste, stir it up to your taste. Do you like it neat? Do you like it on the rocks? Leave it up to you. One thing I do like, though, is a little bit of slight citrus in it. And that's totally also up to you. But with that, and, given the fact that cocktails are so different, what I'm going to show you here today is my favorite version of an old-fashioned. So, with that, I'm going to stir the drink. And unlike a lot of other old-fashions, I'm actually going to do this in a mixing glass, not in the glass I'm going to serve it in. So, again, my variation. So let's start out with some aromatic bitters. We're going to do 2 dashes of aromatic bitters. Now, these can be any ones that you like I said. Just pick a good quality one. Next, rich Demerara syrup. I use 2-to-1 here. Rather than a simple Demerara, rather than a gum syrup, I like a rich Demerara syrup. Now, what I'm going to say here is I'm going to say a bar spoon. Well, bar spoons are all different sizes. So what this actually comes out to is about 1/4 of a teaspoon. So I'm going to put in 1/4 teaspoon of rich Demerara syrup. into here. The reason why I like to do that is I don't like it to get stuck to the inside of the jigger, and you know, you lose a little bit of that nice syrup. Okay, so now we're gonna get our base spirit. So pick a really good one. I prefer to use straight rye whiskey. So you can use any type of whiskey that you like. My favorite happens to be rye, and I like to get small batched craft distilleries type whiskeys when I'm getting mine. So this one comes from Few Spirits, and this is from Evanston, Illinois. They have a really, really tasty rye whiskey. This is fantastic on its own. It's fantastic neat, but it's also fantastic in this type of drink. So this one right here, I'm going to use 2 ounces. Love those nice little pops. All right, 2 ounces right in there. Perfect. All right, last now, what we're going to do is add in some ice. Nice big rock of ice here. Grab that guy. Finally got myself some tongs from Cocktail Kingdom. There's a link for these below too. All right, now from here, once you got your ice in there, big thing is let's start to stir. Put your finger on the outside, and how long do you stir? It's up to you, right? I hate warm old fashions. I don't think bitters and syrup and warm spirits taste really good together. I think you got to chill it down. So I stir this as long as it takes for the outside of my finger to get cold. Nearly there. All right, good. Let's give it a little taste and test. Yeah, perfect. Now, we're gonna put this inside of our glass. I like to use a double old-fashioned glass for this. I know some people like to use just a single old-fashioned. I like the double. I like a little bit of extra room and good fit in your hand. So we're going to put that down right on our Woodrow coaster. Then I'm going to grab myself a julep strainer, and we're going to put a rock of ice. I like to serve mine on with ice in the glass. So I'm just going to grab myself a nice, not huge, but a good rock size of a clear ice cube. And then from there, let's go ahead and pour that right there over the top. Nice. Next, garnish. So for a garnish here, a lot of guys like to use like peel, and I do. I mean, orange peel, lemon peel, lime peel. They're all good. What I prefer though, and I'm trying to get one here that's a good size. Here we go. This is good. I like a piece of dehydrated fruit. It's an intense flavor of citrus. It sits on there. It's a little bit different. No, you don't get the oil on there, but you get that aroma still. Like this is intense smell of orange, and I prefer the scent of orange versus the taste of it. Inside of my old fashioned, I like the taste to be purely the 3 ingredients that I put in there. So this little guy just goes right there, which is why I like this type of a glass for this. It floats right on top of that big rock of ice. And then there you have it, everyone. That is RumRunner Dan's variation on the classic old fashioned. Let's give it a taste. Yeah. So, I mean, it's everything that you expect. So the predominant thing here, there's a slight bit of sweetness from the syrup, very, very mild. You get some spiciness right in there and some little tiny bit of bitter, but more spiciness coming from the Angus story here. But of course, the big thing here, it's the whiskey. So you gotta like the whiskey, and the whiskey has to be a really good quality. And the better quality of the whiskey, the better quality this drink is. And Few does not disappoint. This is a punch in your face, kind of strong, really rye whiskey. I love this one. So I think it's perfect for this drink because you have that big punch of rye here. And I like my old fashions to have a good kick, not an alcoholic kick so much, but the flavor. You want strong kind of flavor on oak. You want strong flavor of those grains inside of it. So you really want it to come through. So I think this is a perfect, fantastic sipping drink. It's It's a good one to use to like wind down the day, sitting at home, chilling out, whether it's spring, summer, fall, winter. It's like an any kind of time drink. Well, that's all that we have for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in today for our episode of The Old Fashioned. And be sure to check out our other videos. Got some links down here to a couple other ones for you that are going to pop up. And if you haven't, go ahead and hit that little subscribe button there. And until next time, everybody, Kole Maluna. Yeah, good drink.